Welcome back to the HirePOS Fundamentals Video Series. In this video, we're going to create our first few items in HirePOS. We'll make 5 different types: a standard hire item or asset, a bulk hire item, a no-charge hire companion, a sales inventory item, and a non-stock service item for delivery. We'll go through what all of this means in just a moment. Today, we'll be adding each item manually, but if you already have a spreadsheet of your items with their attributes, categories, prices, and so on, you can import that directly into HirePOS to quickly add hundreds of items in one go. We'll cover that process in a separate video. Let's start by creating a standard hire item. Let's imagine it's an excavator. From the main menu, go to Setup, then Items, and click New Item. Every item needs at least a description, a code, and an item type. HirePOS will suggest an item code automatically. If you already have asset numbers or identifiers, enter those instead. For example, EX01. If not, you can let HirePOS assign numbers, starting from something like 1001 and incrementing up from there. I'll set this one to 1001 and choose hire as the item type, because this is a physical asset that goes out and comes back. If it didn't come back or wasn't physical, I'd choose a non-hire type. Next, I'll assign it to the excavators category. Here's an important concept: quantity for hire. If this is a unique asset, set it to 1. That means it gets its own serial number, purchase date, cost price, and more. If you buy a second identical excavator later, you'd create a new item for it. You wouldn't just increase this quantity. For items that you don't track individually, like chairs or tables, you'd set a higher quantity and track them in bulk. We'll do that in our next example. Below, in the configuration section, you'll see options that affect how the item behaves. You won't need most of these most of the time, but it's important to understand what they're for, and just as importantly, when not to use them. Non-stock is by far the most commonly used option here. It turns off stock tracking for sales items, effectively treating them as services, fees, or charges rather than physical inventory. Is delivery vehicle is optional and low use. It simply allows an item to be assigned as a vehicle on the delivery and pickup schedule. It doesn't affect pricing or availability, and most databases will only ever have a handful of items using this, if any. Metered is used for equipment that requires meter readings on dispatch and return, for example, hours or kilometers. When enabled, HirePOS will prompt for those readings on the invoice screen. Not selectable, sometimes called package header, prevents the item from being added directly to an invoice. The item can only be added via an item package. This is useful for bundled items, items that should never travel alone, or internal use only items. Test and tag not required only applies if you're using the electrical test and tag features in the maintenance module. By default, HirePOS assumes that items require testing. This checkbox marks an item as exempt. If you're not using test and tag, this setting does nothing. EOM rollover item is rarely needed. Hire items already roll to the next invoice naturally during end-of-month rollovers. This option forces non-hire items, like sales items or fees, to carry over to the next invoice as well. In most cases, the default behavior is exactly what you want. Restrict double bookings is a very strict safety option. It prevents emailing or issuing records if there's any type of availability conflict. HirePOS already provides strong double booking warnings, so this is only for exceptional cases where absolute availability certainty is critical for this particular item. In summary, the settings you'll most commonly use are non-stock, metered, and not selectable. The others exist for specific cases, and it's best to leave them off unless you have a clear problem that you're trying to solve. Okay, now that we've looked at the configuration section, let's move on to the Rates and Prices tab. This is where you're going to set up the billing structure for the item. For this example, we'll add a day unit at $100 excluding GST and a week unit at $450 excluding GST. With this setup, the first 4 days are charged daily, and then days 5 to 7 are billed at the weekly rate. Beyond that, 2 weeks would be twice the weekly rate, and 3 weeks would be 3 times the weekly rate, and so on. This is just one possible setup. In HirePOS, almost any billing structure you can imagine can be configured using selling units, from simple daily or weekly rates to tiered daily pricing to per hire or per event charges. You might even have multiple custom units for specific use cases. It's best to set these up with the help of a HirePOS support representative so that we can match the system to your existing billing rules. We'll just need some examples of how you charge, and we can help configure the units to suit your needs. For now, we'll stick with the standard day and week setup, but in a coming example, we'll look at a simple each rate as well, which is common for events industry businesses amongst others. Let's just have a look at a couple more tabs on this screen before we finish up by creating the rest of our items. The other tab is for things like make, model, year, rego details, and attributes like color, weight, and dimensions. You can also link manuals or safety documentation here. The Purchase Disposal tab records the purchase price, purchase date, disposal details, and more for reporting and asset tracking. The Stock Control tab is mainly used for sales items, which we'll cover shortly. If you have the Maintenance module enabled, you'll see a tab called Maintenance, which has fields for inspections and service intervals. And the Cross-Hire tab lets you record supplier information for specific types of cross-hire agreements. Companions automatically add related items to a quote or booking. For example, our excavator always goes out with a mud bucket. I'll create a new item for the bucket in the relevant category with no pricing and then save it. Back in the Excavator's Companions tab, I'll add the bucket as a required companion. Now, whenever the excavator is added to a hire, HirePOS will automatically attempt to add the bucket as well. Companions can be used for optional upsells, accessories, or mandatory attachments that should always be offered or included when another item is booked. Custom fields and images. Custom fields let you create nameable fields for extra details not covered elsewhere. Images let you store photos of the item, which appear in the app, on quotes, invoices, pick slips, and more. I'll save this item and let's move on. Now for a bulk item example, a trestle table. The item type will be hire. The quantity for hire we'll set as 50. We don't track each table individually. HirePOS just works out availability by subtracting those on hire from the total owned. All of the configuration options here can be default. Here, we are going to assume that we're not billing for days out, but rather just per hire. So, in our Rates and Prices tab, we only need one unit, each, at $10 excluding GST. Next, a sales item. Let's consider a 10-meter power lead. The item type will be sales, the category power cables. And on the Rates and Prices tab, we'll set an each price at $55 including GST. As this is a sales item, the Stock Control tab is now active. Here, there are fields for supplier codes, barcodes, locations, preferred suppliers, your stock quantities, and reorder points. Stock levels are based on your last stock take, adjusted considering purchase orders and sales that have occurred since then. Finally, a non-stock item. The name will be Delivery and Pickup Fee. The item type, miscellaneous, though you might create a dedicated delivery type later on. Configuration, we're going to turn non-stock on, as we're not tracking stock quantities for delivery fees. In the Rates and Prices tab, let's select each and set it as $99 including GST. In this example, we're keeping it simple with a flat $99 rate for delivery, but HirePOS gives you plenty of flexibility with delivery pricing. You can set up postcode or zone-based rates, a dollar per kilometre charge, or even just enter the fee manually for each job. So in this session, we've created a standard hire item, a bulk hire item, a no-charge hire companion, a sales inventory item, and a non-stock service item. We've done them one by one for clarity, but remember, with an item import, you can add hundreds of items at once. In the next video, we'll use these items in our first hire so you can see them in action. Thanks for watching. You can always get more help and info at help.hirepos.com. See you in the next video.